Okay. Should I walk up there and say, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present to you. That'd be great. One headlight.
Yeah. I didn't have to worry about it.
That probably would be too, but.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, that would be it. That'd be interesting. Well, now's the time. Your dog is so good.
Really? Because last time it was.
It's really changed. So like, we're at 70 cents. Oh, well.
Are you kidding?
So your dollar costs us about 14 years.
Oh.
So make the most of it. Yeah. Could do it in one of those grass huts.
Wow.
Yeah, the oil price is going down really.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like you wouldn't hold the kind.
Yeah.
You guys kind
Exactly
of.
right.
got through that.
Are we expecting more people if we experience severe battle attrition?
No, I think it's the football team.
Football game. What are we doing here? Don't you guys care about your home team? No.
We can
Normal see how.
We can give some updates.
Right. That's why God gave us iPhones.
And the ESPN app.
Right on.
Okay. This actually broadcasting now has been for a while.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, good morning. Good morning. I know, I'm in the life. Sorry good to me.
How's everybody on heat?
It's warm.
I'm good at the moment.
What is the spiritual significance of second?
If it gets too loud or something you just want me to turn it off, yell at me. I'm gonna leave it running for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a group, we can huddle up close,
Yeah, huddle up.
sit in each other's laps.
There you go.
Huddle up. Huddle up.
Come on here.
We're almost down to hot tubs.
Yeah.
I'm all over that. So.
This retreat is coming at a really good time for me. I'm having a very difficult time with a close friend, and they're aggravating the devil on me. And after our conversation yesterday, I found myself thinking, all I can do is take care of my little bubble. And even at that, I'm sort of I don't have much control of that. But thinking that I know what the heck's going on with another person, and what's going on, what's going on in their bubbles, or why they're doing X or Y or Z, can't do that. Really don't know. And all the little things that I think I see are just tiny pieces of. So that's helped.
It's all incoherent weirdness all the time.
Yeah.
And you do what you make the best of it and try and dodge the bullets and stay out of the rain and So one of the more possibly one of the more difficult things to get about spirituality is how there's no such thing. The whole notion that there's any normalcy in any spirituality is hogwash. This is all about what is normal. What is this that is here? It's really not any fancy thing. What is here happens to be really weird, and that's as fancy as it gets. But that's just luck of the draw. That's just a given that it happens to be the case. And so all of spirituality is basically kind of trying to catch up with that fact. Trying to catch up with the fact of, well, here this is, I've never had a handle on it. What's up with that? And then when you get that, oh, it's impossible to have a handle on it, suddenly that sort of comes into focus a little more. And then you go, oh, no wonder I'm clueless, because there's no way to make sense of what's going on here. You know, and of course it's easy at first glance to take that as a problem, as a negativity, but of course it's not. That's actually a great opportunity, because the fact that you can't possibly have it together and don't have a clue actually gives you opportunity to explore, to play with it, to have fun, to take advantage of the weirdness for joy and self-empowerment, and to rip people off. or whatever your preference in terms of how you like to pass your time. I mean, look at Trump. The man's a spiritual genius. He knows for a fact no one has a clue, and they'll believe any bullshit whatsoever he throws at them.
And he's doing it.
And he's doing it big
And he
time.
buys the media.
He's living large. He's living large. So you too can. Take advantage of people's confusion for your own benefit, or take advantage of your own confusion for your own benefit. Incoherence turns out to be a wonderful opportunity, a wonderful asset, because if things are actually structured and have a very rigid way that they are, then it's kind of like being in jail. It's kind of like having something you have to work with or work against in some elaborate, constraints that you have to learn the rules and follow the laws and so on. And when you get to, well, gee, the things are kind of way more open than that. Things are kind of way looser than that. It's like, oh, great, cool. You get out of jail free card, literally, and you just can have at it and explore and take advantage of all the loopholes in the incoherence that this actually consists of, which turns out to be a lot of fun, empowering, and opens opportunity for all kinds of more experiential enjoyment, exploration, if you want to, if you're interested, you can take advantage of that. You can explore it. You can play with it. I mean, that's so this is just us hanging out. This is just this that is here, and there's no limit to the ways that we can play with it and poke at it and explore it. And you all have been around the block. As I look at this crowd, yeah, you've all been around the block for sure. So you don't need to really do too much disproving of the coarse, gross, obvious naiveties. You've kind of already been there, and you can start to get play with the fine points. Look at the real little interesting openings that can be found.
So for those of us who are a bit more literal, could you just maybe say a little bit more about that last sentence? Playing with the openings that can be found.
Right. Well, you're only constrained by the nature of things in your own nature. And it turns out that both the nature of things is much more multidimensional than is generally supposed. And by multidimensional, I mean the coexistence of radically different perspectives and implications with equal viability. And in terms of the constraints of your own limitations, of your own nature, Your own nature, likewise, is a lot less constrained than you may be used to thinking of yourself. But who you are and what your properties are and what your abilities are and so on is entirely a vastly broader spectrum than you're used to acknowledging. Simply because most of what you are is unthinkable. So it can't be thought of, it can only be felt. And of course, you actually are already feeling all that and already doing all that. But for most people, they do that kind of more open-ended thing in their dreams and their deep sleep and things like that. And then, but in their waking life, they may tend to feel more constrained by who they're defining themselves to be, and who they think their role is, and who they think, their limitations are. But you can start taking advantage of those kinds of dreamlike non-linearities in the waking life, because in actual fact, there's no difference. And in actual fact, when you begin to acknowledge these irrational non-linear modes and flavors, in other words, modes that make no sense and yet are viable, are actual, you can start participating in and partaking in those flavors of energy and engagement and behavior, for your own enjoyment or edification or whatever.
And for instance, of a mode that makes no sense.
I don't know, you make absolutely no sense to me. I make no sense to me.
I'm trying to make sense.
I mean, try and find an example of a mode that does make sense.
I just find examples helpful. I'm very
No, sure. But that's the point. You aren't literal. Maybe you have part of you is literal and used to being literal, but you're also not literal at all. You also take enormous liberties. Let yourself feel the way that you do that. And even if you can't describe them or acknowledge them, they're actually there. Think of it as your unconscious nature or your, whatever. We're all a vast constellation of all sorts of forces that essentially are a hodgepodge. They're not integrated into a nice coherent pattern. We're all a collection of just an astounding array of energies and desires and insights and capabilities and that have nothing to do with anything. They certainly don't have much to do with each other. They just happen to be there. We're how when the water comes down out of the mountains, it sweeps all sorts of twigs and leaves and detritus and all that stuff sort of catches up on rocks that are there and builds up. That's what we're like. We're an accidental accumulation of all sorts of forces and energies that are just there by accident. They just happen to be there. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's not the result of a carefully constructed architectural plan or schematic. It's just a random throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. Or it doesn't stick, maybe. And so noticing that fact and settling into it, feeling your own chaos, feeling your own, incoherence is actually a great opportunity. It's an invitation to inhabit that, to begin to play with those aspects of ourselves which don't make any sense, which are not necessarily socially approved, not necessarily acknowledged by yourself even, let alone by anyone else. Not that there's any particular point to that. The point is self-actualization. The point is to be what you are. You are what you are, so there's no reason not to be it and enjoy it. Participating in your own energies is inherently pleasurable. That's what life's about. It's nourishing, it's fulfilling.
It's probably not, it's not a problem, I would imagine, unless it is tried to fit into the mental framework, or that the mind tries to grab it and make the incoherence, randomness,
And even when that happens, it's a pretense, because it can never actually happen. When the mind tries to make things fit into a framework, it's pretending to do so, but it's not actually making anything fit into anything.
Right.
Because the energies are there. Whether they're being acknowledged or not, whether they're being, apologized for or not.
It's almost like they have nothing actually to do with or direct experience or something. It's almost like the mental framework or the thoughts about it don't actually affect reality at all. They're like a different building block.
Exactly so. I mean, this was the bulk of our exploration yesterday, was the way in which our ideas about things don't correspond to the things themselves.
Yeah.
So what we think we are, what we think things are, and the way that we think they work is all bullshit. It's all hot air. It's all apologism. It doesn't actually address what's actually here and what's actually happening, the way that it is, what it is, and the way that it happens. And this is like that internally as well, in our personalities and in our sense of ourselves. Exactly the same destruction exists.
So it would be great if you could say a little more about reference points. I was reading that last night in the book.
I'll tell you about, there's one thing to say about reference points, and only one. There are none.
But we live out of them. We make them, don't we? I
You
mean,
may, but when you do, you're pretending, you're lying.
yes.
It's a pretense, it's a sham. I mean, that's what, there's no, that's a,
So a reference, I mean, I just want to understand. So a reference point is me, there's a me sitting here.
and that's an example of a reference point.
What would be another example? Just so that.
Anything is defined as being a certain way.
Okay.
Anything you can refer to.
It's not that things aren't what they are, it's that they aren't what you think they are and they aren't what you say they are. Not that you're being duplicitous deliberately, but the very nature of referential thinking is a sham. Thoughts pretend to be and claim to be about things, and they are not. Because the nature of what is being, of the actuality that is supposedly being thought about, completely and utterly diverges from the structure of the thoughts and the language that are supposedly doing the thinking. So it's like trying to, it's like trying to do quantum physics with a bowling ball. This is a disjunction. How do you do, here's a bowling ball, and that's my language. Now I'm going to do quantum physics. There's a mismatch there, you can't do it. So likewise, we have these ideas in language, they're like bowling balls. And what you are is like, a chaotic thermonuclear reaction within a star. And how do you try and draw some correlation there? How do you try and make that into a useful correspondence?
I once thought of the example of it's like trying to pitch a tent in space. You should have put the tent post down.
Yeah, you have to pretend to do it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we do. You can't have actual reference points, so we pretend to. And we've gotten very, very good at pretending. But we trip ourselves up that we've forgotten we're pretending. And I mean, that's literally historically true. Because, when each of us was an infant, we didn't know anything. And our adults came along and said, oh, this is I'm daddy, this is mommy, that's a car. And you're like, that means absolutely nothing to me, but I'll play along. Okay, you're daddy, that's a car. Or maybe that's a dog. No, a car. Cat. No, a car. Oh, car. Oh, good boy.
Oh my God.
But you know all along that you're playing a silly game that means nothing. But you get strokes from playing it, so you play it, and it's total gibberish and hogwash, and you're just pretending. It's like, wait, let's play make-believe. But then when you go into adulthood, for most of us, you've forgotten that that's the case, and you think that that is a car. I am Peter Brown. This is that. Whereas all those are pretenses in the game of let's describe the world. Let's describe the indescribable world. And typically we get to be very good at playing that game. But unfortunately, typically we forget that it's a game. When you remember it's a game, then you remember it has actually no rules, then you can be Donald Trump. Fuck you, I'm lying, cheating, and stealing, and I'm going to be president. You don't love me.
This infant example, yeah, whenever I come back to that, it's just so incredibly valuable because it's like all of a sudden the big mystery just goes away. It's like, wow, that is so epic simple.
Well, of course it's simple. It is simple.
How would I get caught up in a no reference point and what does that
Well,
mean?
because you're making the mistake of trying to follow along the game, assuming that it actually has some basis. It's all bullshit. You've been sold a bill of goods. It's not worth following up on. You know, forget language, forget, you know, normal descriptions. I mean, you don't need to like forget how to talk and become like a crazy wild person living in the woods. But you can. But just realize that it's a game, it's arbitrary, it's pretend. You know, being social is a game, so people around you don't kill you and eat you. Hopefully. They may do that anyway.
But it seems like the one crucial piece of information you're missing as a child, yeah,
As a child, they don't tell you it's a game.
correct.
They're very heavy-handed.
They've already lapsed.
Yeah, they're very heavy-handed, trying to convince you it's really like that.
And it's
eventually, they usually
It's
succeed.
really important.
Yeah,
Really, really important.
yeah.
Yeah. Yesterday, when we were talking about language, it's happened to me a couple times this morning too. It seems less like, it seems like what's going on when I'm listening to you talk. I feel like it's some kind of interactive poetry reading.
Well, it is.
You know, it just doesn't, it's not that I'm not understanding the words, or clearly I can still form a sentence, but there's a sense of play underneath it that is often missing.
Yeah.
Unless you are intentionally writing.
Yeah.
You know?
When people speak and talk and think as if it's for real, as if they mean it, they're like zombies, they're like robots. You know. But when you know the actual context of all that, then you enter into something that could be called magical speech, where you're using speech and it may look to an uninitiated observer as if you're speaking rationally like the person who buys the game. But if you're not coming from a context of the game, you're coming from another context entirely, that information is embodied in the speaking, even though the speaking superficially doesn't look like it. So it's kind of like a Trojan horse. And that's what spiritual communication consists of. So you're using words and saying words, and you may even be using words very artfully, so what you're saying is articulate and meaningful, but in actual fact there's something else going on. And you can feel it. And that's where the good stuff is. I came to that by example, and it was never explained to me. My spiritual master, who was much older than me, and I spent about a decade off and on very loosely hanging out with him. He never was a spiritual teacher. We would hang out and he would bullshit. We would tell stories and we would drink. That consisted of my connection with him. But it used to drive me nuts because all the time he was talking and telling the story, there was something else going on. And I would be like, what's happening? What's going on? And it was just this koan to me. It was like, you know, I mean, I spent probably an 8-year period from the time I started hanging out with him until the time I basically stopped. And from that whole time, there was just this koan hanging over the whole thing.
Mm.
There's something here, there's something going on here, you know, and it's entirely not being discussed, but it's somehow of the essence. It's somehow enormously powerful.
Mm.
Do you think he knew that?
Huh?
Do you think he knew what was being communicated?
Yeah, sure, but it's not like he was doing something. I mean, it's not manipulation. It's just that it's the nature of that.
Yes.
I mean, this is why a person's energy, you could say, is basically communicated when they speak. To the extent they're, let's say, in their energy, if if you're just totally lost in a cloud and being bullshit, then it'll be bullshit. But so a person's, you could say, spiritual condition or energy resonance. I mean, there's also a million new age ways to parse that. Is communicated anytime there's any contact with them. And in the case of words, which pretend to be so specifically about something, the energy that's there may have any degree of or nothing to do with the words that are being said. But when a person that is in their energy communicates, that's what is being communicated. And it comes across. It's felt, whether or not it's acknowledged, whether or not it has specific effect, is for real. And this is a very peculiar aspect of communication.
Is that seems like what you would call transmission?
Sure, it's an aspect of that. Sure.
So, oh, sorry.
Basically, a spiritual master, what they really have to communicate is their condition, their state. It's not information. It's a place of sitting in energy. And they communicate it by doing it, by being it, and they let you see it by communicating with you.
It's almost like it's the absence of trying to affect something. It's
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, because it's basically divorced from the main structure of superficial language. And language is just used as a medium of exchange, as a bridge. But the information is the entire thing. I mean, it's like you go and see a Van Gogh, and sure, there's paint on a canvas and its color and its shape and all that. But Jesus fuck, I mean, there's some serious vibe there, and it's not just the paint and the canvas and all that. I'm sure it's somehow encoded in that, but you're getting sucker punched by this guy's energy. You're feeling his perspective, and that's what makes it art great. Not the way he puts the paint on the canvas. Who gives a shit about that? I mean, it's that intense, crazy vibe that, I mean, the guy was a madman, and what a delicious madman. It's just so juicy, so wonderful.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a celebration. It's like, oh my God, that is exquisitely beautiful.
It leaps across.
Yeah.
It's.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing subtle about it.
No, and it's like that sort of shows you that these normal ways that we think we receive information are just not how it happens.
Information is always fulfilled.
Yeah.
Yeah, whether that's acknowledged or not. And by and large, in human communication, it's not acknowledged.
No, not at all.
I mean, a lot of people who are aware of this use this for manipulative purposes. I mean, con men and people like that. The whole basis of a con is all this sort of thing.
Yeah, I got conned once, and it was an energetic thing.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. A good con man, there's a magician. I mean, they're using subtle energy. But a good salesman does too. A good anything, any kind of effective manipulation.
I have to say that there was a time in my life when I was living on the wrong side of the street, and I knew a lot of prostitutes, and that's exactly what was going on.
Yeah, sure.
It wasn't about the sex. It was about something else that nobody could really quite put their finger on. It was all very magical.
Of course.
Amazing.
Of course. In more sort of raw or primitive or less cultured exchanges, all this is much more explicit and obvious.
Yeah.
Hang out in bars or hang out in a seedy environment, and it's all that stuff's more on the surface because it doesn't have a pretense of the veneer of coherence.
I don't think it was the wrong side of the street.
Well,
The other.
I would say that.
The raw side.
You ex-mugs.
Living large, living raw. And so in terms of all this particular topic, the point is not some particular message that you're supposed to get out of the subtle energy. The point is just to feel that it's there, and it shows you what it is, and it shows you how to orient within it. It's all intrinsic. It's not something you need to do or you need to incorporate. But just by being exposed to the reality of that aspect of things, you naturally accommodate to it. It shows you how to, because you already know how to, in fact, because you live there too, even if you are typically more or less cut off from it by your normal orientation to your mental framework.
You use that phrase. It shows you how to orient to it.
Absolutely, it really does.
Who's the you in that? I mean, they're both the same thing.
Well, don't worry about it. Don't try to parse it, but in fact, it shows you how to orient to it. And there actually is an orientation, and there is a you and an it.
Okay.
But don't worry about exactly what the you is and what the it is and whether they're separate or not, because that's just philosophizing, and you can spin any bullshit you want about that. The point is to do it. I mean, that's why I call this a yoga. The point is to do it, not to rhapsodize about it. Notwithstanding all the rhapsodizing going on.
I'm just trying to research and analyze.
Yeah, I know you are. For your dissertation.
And for me, the effect of that phrase is that it brings you into relaxation.
Yeah.
It gives you confidence.
Yeah, I mean, relaxation and confidence are both euphemisms for integration with your fuller energy field. I mean, basically, this is all about what might be called subtle energy. But calling it subtle energy is opening a can of worms, because there's all sorts of implications that go along with that, and all sorts of a whole body of history of theories and so on about that, which is just stepping into another zone of bullshit. But nonetheless, it is meaningful to feel these phenomena as an energy field, without worrying too much about exactly what you mean by that. And all of being alive, all of being a functional living entity, is sitting in your energy field in various ways. Every single bit of it. Functionality, health, just even manifestation is all about sitting in your energy field. And it happens that there's a broad variety of different ways to sit in it, because it's very slippery, it's very multidimensional. And so becoming artful in learning how to sit in your energy field is part and parcel of what all this stuff's about. But it can't be talked about. As soon as you start to talk about it, or drawing chakra charts or some bullshit like that, you're just, it's like, please, So the best way to do it is feel your way into it, and the best way to feel your way into it is to feel it, and you feel it by feeling it. So I mean, this was again, this was part of my emphasis yesterday. Is just feel what is here. Just let yourself feel what is here. Don't worry about how to do it. Don't worry about what do you mean by that. Just feel what is here anyway. Okay, I don't know how to do that. Okay, cool. Do it anyway. Feel what is here. And by doing that, you learn how to do it, because the subtle energy self-corrects. The subtle energy shows you how to sit in it. But it's all a matter of touching it first. You have to feel it. You have to open to it. And the best way to open to it is to trick yourself. Pretend you're opening to it. Like, feel what is here. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is bullshit. Okay, it's bullshit. Do it anyway. And right there, you're opening the door to, what can't be said, which is this actual. And again, once that door is open, it shows you what to do. It shows you what it is, what you are, and how to sit in it, so to speak. It integrates with itself. it finds itself and pulls itself together and becomes itself. I mean, not that it ever was not itself, but it finds a center of gravity that's most efficient, you could say. It might be analogous to little lumps of mercury that are scattered all over the table, and if the table's made out of rubber and you pull it down apart, all of a sudden all the little clumps come together and they're all of a sudden they're a nice little blob, a coherent blob of mercury. It's not literally like that, of course, but that's kind of a funny image.
So at the retreat, when you invited us to the so-called meditation, that just being there was an example of what
Of course.
you're talking about.
Of course. And the meditation and all the stuff, I would say, is just tricks.
Tricks.
And the tricks are nothing in themselves, but again, they're a vehicle to feel what is here. It all gets down to feel what is here.
I'm just amazed how, the mind just creates a whole thing about that and all this stuff happening.
No, stop. Don't worry about it. It's not like you need to stop that, or not like you need to even worry about it. Your mind may do a great job of creating a model of it, or may bollocks it up utterly. It doesn't matter either way, because that's not what it's about. It's about feeling.
So
Here, watch. Let me show you something. Want to see something amazing? I'm not falling over. How do I do that? How do I keep from falling over? How do I find a point of balance so I don't fall over? How's it? Oh. So how do I do that? How does that happen? It's the energy finds its own balance, and it's something that it knows how to do. I don't need to think not to fall over. I don't need to let me see, my God, I'm going to stand up now. What do I have to do to not fall over? Where's my list? I have to go through the steps. I mean, that's absurd. It's felt. It's a felt energy participation. It's a felt energy integration, you could say. And that's exactly what all this stuff is. It's felt.
So what happens when somebody forgets how to do it? My grandmother forgot how to sit up.
Sure.
How does?
She's moving into a different energy orientation. This less body oriented.
less what?
Body oriented.
Oh, body oriented.
I mean, that's what dying is. When you die, you forget how to do everything.
Right.
You're body oriented.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you stop existing. It doesn't mean you dissipate. It means you shift to a different orientation. The whole energy, instead of being oriented here, all of a sudden is oriented differently. And it knows how to do it. The energy knows how to die. You don't need to learn how to die. I guarantee you.
Right.
When the time comes, you will find yourself doing it.
It's like falling asleep.
Just like you don't need to know how to fall asleep. It's like, oh my God, I can't go to sleep. Where's that book I bought on how to go to sleep? Really?
I think of this man, he was on YouTube and he was totally crazy. And he was yelling out, he goes, "Don't you get? Humans are just a mirror of confusion, so play in it. Have a good time, you know."
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it made me think when you say that, I thought, just go have a good time. You
That's
know,
the way
it's
it
just
started.
a
Exactly.
mirror of confusion, yeah, so play in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the
exactly.
point of all this is ultimately pleasure. The point of all this is
Yeah.
ultimately the life force.
Yeah, just love it. So when
Enjoy
you're talking about that,
being what you are.
yeah,
And the best way to do that is to fully maximize your integration with what you are, so you can,
Exactly.
most fully express your nature.
yeah. It was sad because people were just walking by and not hearing it. I thought, wow, this guy is incredible. Yeah,
But most people don't hear this.
Yeah.
I mean, what I'm saying is not even very mysterious as far as I can tell.
yeah,
Evidently. But the number of people that could hear it and understand it or relate to it at all, I mean, if I was, talking this on YouTube and people stumble onto it,
That's
they
what
would probably move on, you know.
Oh, they say, oh, that crazy guy.
That's what, when you were talking, I was thinking, you would sound just as crazy as he did.
I mean, see, I'm a good bullshitter because I can pretend to be speaking very reasonably and articulately,
Yeah.
but I'm actually, but it's all a front. It's just, that I haven't had a skill at being able to
That's what I
convince,
like.
it's like a con job. I
You
have a
just play the
skill
game a little bit.
that
Yeah.
I can be pretending to play.
Yeah, yeah.
You're leading us on.
Of course. Wouldn't be much of a retreat if I wasn't. Why bother?
You know, when you were speaking of energy, I was thinking like my mother was in her last stage of Alzheimer's and totally comatose, just sitting there, not moving. And I was telling her that I was really sorry that I was such a brat, that I really did love her and I thought she was a really unique woman. She was sitting there totally gone, and then all of a sudden she just picked up my hand and kissed it. So I knew that there was always something there,
Of course.
and it had nothing to do with this comatose body.
Of course.
Yeah, it's such a good reminder that there's nothing to do with what we think is.
Yeah. You're never more or less here.
Yeah.
You're always completely here. But what here is oriented to is wildly variable.
Yeah.
Here can be oriented to the body, it can be oriented to different, you know, dimensional modes. I mean, there's no language for this stuff.
Yeah.
But you're always completely here.
Yeah, I
So
really love that.
people who orient to others as being strictly their body functions are absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, you can be sick and out of it and passing out and you're still you. You don't stop being you. You're not any less you. You're just not able to manifest it physically in the same way because you're, you know, that isn't lining up and, you know, whatever.
And the Alzheimer's had nothing to do with who she really was.
Of course.
She's so apparent.
Of course.
Yeah. True.
Peter,
Good reminder.
have you ever watched someone die?
No. I was my father's caretaker when he was dying, but I missed the last few hours. So that would have been my golden opportunity.
I'm just wondering what you might observe, or maybe you already know, what you might observe when someone dies.
Well, what it looks like from the outside is not particularly important.
Well,
When someone dies, what's interesting when someone dies is what it looks like to them. It's like what you look like to me is much less interesting than what you look like to yourself. I see sort of an echo or a shadow of what you actually are. You are seeing what you actually are because you're the only viewer of yourself. The fact that, you know, it's fortunate that you happen to be casting a partial shadow in my experience, but that's not you. That's just an effect of you.
so you can't fully know what's going on with them.
Of course not. You never can. You never can.
Right.
The only thing you can know is yourself. You are your business. Your business is you. And what you are and how you are, that is, of course, the mother lode of the whole thing.
So what?
But I'm sorry, just one little follow-up. What things look like on the outside is not important. It's what they look like on the inside is important.
More simplistic question. I'd really like to understand what is in the way. I probably could figure this out, but what's in the way of us realizing our true nature? I mean, we're all.
Nothing whatsoever. You already have realized your true nature. This is your true nature.
But we're attached to this self-concept.
Maybe, but that's just a relatively immature way to orient towards it. But it's not any less real. Your attachment to your, if it's there, if you have an attachment to your self nature or your idea of whatever's going on, is the way that you're oriented to your energy, and you're doing that genuinely. It's the genuine you, genuinely orienting to your genuine energy, but you're doing it in a way that is, you know, whatever, slightly, whatever it is, let's call it slightly off center, say. And so this fabled self-realization is just centering it more. But it's not like it's not like it gets any better or more real or more complete or anything.
Huh.
It's like when I demonstrated my miraculous ability to not fall over. It's like that. You know, when you're immature, you're kind of falling over. It's like a toddler learning to walk. They haven't found that balance point. So it's really, so self-realization is really about finding the sort of the center, the balance of your energy nature. And it's not literally that. It's not literally a center and a spatial center. These are all highly metaphorical,
Yeah.
you know, evocations.
So you said something about, let me find that word again. Well, this so-called notion, I can't remember exactly, but that really kind of captures it. I have a notion because of what I've read and what I've heard about this, you know, so-called liberation from this sense of me. And I guess it just is stuck in my imagination.
Yeah, but here's one thing to remember. You can write this down. I insist you write it down. All notions, all ideas are wrong.
Yes, I know that.
Write it down and underline it. But that is the title of your notes.
Including all of this.
This is about felt presence. It's not about ideas or descriptions or notions of what you can write in the book or what you can read in the book. It's about felt presence. The ability to stand up and walk without falling over is a matter of felt presence, not a matter of notions and ideas and things you read in the book.
Feels like it's almost all or nothing or something, like mental ideas or frameworks are trying to understand it or something. It feels like Velcro or something that's kind of separated, and the experience of reality actually is unchanged at all, but the other piece, the mind, kind of still hangs out and does its thing. But I guess what I've seen lately or what I'm aware of is just that it's almost like the mental frameworks, they didn't actually impact or change reality at all. They kind of just, like I said earlier, have nothing almost to do with it. They can still exist. They still exist, but it's almost like here, it's almost like there's no mental framework that's going to get you out of mental frameworks.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, mental frameworks pretend to be mental frameworks. They aren't really. And thoughts and ideas aren't really thoughts and ideas. Thoughts and ideas are real. They're real energy. You know what they're like? Here's a good model for what thinking and thoughts are. You know how when you have a shadow of something, like say you have a shape, you know how people make shadows of dogs' heads and things like that. So suppose you have a bright light source and you have a shape casting a shadow on a flat surface. The shadow more or less reflects the shape of the thing that's casting the shadow. Now you suppose you cast that shadow on a wildly rippling, curving surface. What shape would the shadow have? And that's the orientation that the patterns of thought have to the patterns of your actual nature. They reflect it, but they reflect it wildly distorted.
Just as the nature of that energy, or why? Why do you say that it's reflected, is distorted?
Well, I'm using that as a model. It's not literally that. Because
I know, but
because thought is real energy. You know, the idea that thought is over here and it's somehow different or wrong or separate from real energy, and there's some two worlds, and then the world of thought and then the world of reality is a fallacy. It's not true. There is no world of thought. Thought pretends there's a world of thought, and thought implies that there's a world of thought, but it's a mistaken implication. What thought is actually energy presence.
so
and the energy, like all energy, is highly patterned. But the patterning is way beyond what the patterning of the verbal and semantic definition of the thoughts and words implies. The patterning is patterning of the actual energy, which is an embodiment of the energy that it's an aspect of.
But you're saying it's the interpretation that creates the distortion?
No,
Oh, okay. That's what I.
Well, it's language that creates the distortion. The interpretation isn't even there. The interpretation is an illusion implied by language.
Okay.
In other words, the structure of language highly filters the energy that it embodies. Okay, in the same sense that, let me see if I can try and express this clearly. If I said, communicate to me an idea in words, and you wrote a sentence, and I said, now draw it, communicate it in a drawing, and you did a drawing, and I said, okay, communicate it to me in movement, and you did, I don't know, you did some movement. The information would be very heavily filtered by the medium of expression. The drawing would seem to be very, very different than the words you wrote. But if you were articulate, they could still embody the meaning. So this is what I mean by the structure of language filters the information. But the structure of language filters the information as a direct energy presence. Now, it happens that language pretends to be referential, language pretends to be about something, words pretend to have definitions and meanings, none of which is actually true. And that's where you leap off into insanity, that's where you leap off into craziness. Because at that point, you're just off and nothing is connected to anything. Words don't actually mean anything.
Yeah, that.
And as soon as you think words mean anything and you start chasing after the meanings, you're just like, you're gaga.
Yeah.
You're totally nowhere. But the words themselves, as thought, are not that. The words themselves are energy presence, which is actual. Meanings of words is not actual. Words are actual. Thought is actual. Thought embodies meaning. All actual energy presence embodies meaning.
So when I end with the word as an so there is this trapping of the language, slicing and dicing everything, and then there's also this energy that is accompanying all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I end with that energy, it seems to kind of resolve itself at some kind of like surfing, so to speak.
Exactly so.
But then it's like, at the end of all this, there's some space, that center, so to speak. But as soon as the familiar conditioning comes back, like I go outside, need to do my tax forms or whatever. Now that I'm somehow finding that all of this does not resolve to finding a center there.
Right.
Because I am now needing to look at the language, look at, deal with in those specific terms.
Right.
So at work, for instance, if someone says something, it is like I have to necessarily parse it in exactly that way.
Right. Yeah, but this is a matter of, on the one hand, distraction. The reason why needing to follow language for a specific purpose, like doing your tax form, the reason why this feels like it may remove you somewhat from your center is a matter of distraction and focus of attention. Your center hasn't actually gone anywhere first, but your attention is all of a sudden on all these abstractions. So that's being emphasized in the field of experience. And You missed the earlier part of our talk, I believe, where we talked about the way in which language is a game. When you remember language is a game, then you can play you can say, oh, I have to do my tax forms, what fun, it's a game. And you know the rules and you know the words are supposed to mean this, and you line up the words and you line up the numbers, and all of a sudden there's your taxes done. But it's a game you're playing, and it's you, your energy center, that is playing the game. And at that point, you're not losing it. It's when you forget you're playing a game and you identify with the semantic information, and all of a sudden you're so distracted and off center that you literally lose your balance. I mean, energetically you lose your balance, because you're trying to embody yourself in the language as if it was true, and you forget it's just a pretense, it's a game. It's like Monopoly. The rules are completely made up. Let's pretend that this word means this. Let's pretend that that word means that. Let's pretend when we string them together, there's rules of grammar and rules of logic, and all of a sudden you have all that stuff. But it's a game, it's like cards, it's like poker.
So what helps to room for that?
Yes, feeling. Like I was talking about yesterday, train in feeling the presence of experience. You know, not thinking about it. You don't need to suppress thought. Thought is not a problem, but don't concentrate on thought. Just feel your energy presence. Feel the presence of experiencing. And because these things are actualities, it's real energy presence, but it's entirely irrational. You can't describe, you can't know what it is. And so by feeling that, you're training in being with the actuality of your energy presence, without needing to play the game of describing it, pretending you can describe it, or getting lost in words. And you just do that every once in a while, and over a period of time, just by doing that, you train yourself in a kind of a familiarity that's there. And then you don't even need to pay attention to it, but it's just sort of in the background as a reference, as a frame of reference. And so then even when you have to do something very intellectual, you have to do some, mathematics or something, you still have more of a background feeling of the energy presence, so you don't get so off balance.
Wow, that's very helpful.
I mean, it's really, I said it yesterday, and I'll emphasize it, probably many times for today's out. In practice, this all gets down to one very, very simple thing. Feel the presence of your actuality. Bang, period, is that. Bang, the whole shooting match right there. That's the entirety of yoga. And that does everything. That one thing does everything. It opens the door to what you actually are. And once that door is open, what you actually are folds into itself and finds its balance intrinsically. And that's what they call realization.
And language, it seems like it's such a great one to feel. For one thing, I think for a lot of us, initially, it was kind of a revelation that there was there is something to feel. There is definitely something to feel.
Well, this is a very good yogic exercise. Just sit quietly, and feel yourself thinking. Obviously, thinking will happen from time to time. And when you notice you're thinking, feel what's there. How can you tell you're thinking? What is it that's present that you can tell you're thinking? So don't worry about following the thoughts. Just feel thinking happening. And how do you know you're thinking? There must be something there, or you wouldn't know you're thinking. You're not pretending you're thinking, you're really thinking. So what's there? Just like when you're seeing, that means light's there. We don't have a word for the substance of thought, not in English anyway. In Sanskrit, there's a bunch of technical terms, but it's better not to go into that rat's nest. But just, as you're sitting and you notice yourself thinking, feel what's present. And actually, you can do this with any of the senses. This is a really great exercise. I was asked to do some exercise today. So here comes all the exercises in one. So here's the basis of all these kinds of exercises, a little experiment. You feel the texture of targeted areas of your experience. So you just sit in your experience there. Of course, you can't not experience. So you just sit and relax, and you notice your experience. And don't make a big deal out of it. Just experience. And just feel the presence. Like say, okay, there's vision present, there's seeing present. So how do I know there's seeing present? What is present? What is it that's here that I know I'm seeing? It's, you can call it the presence of light in your experience. So what does light feel like? Light is a something. What's it feel like? You just feel, don't worry about answering the question, just feel it. And you'll feel it and your mind will spin off and start spinning and thinking all kinds of bullshit. Don't worry about it, just come back and feel it. Very lightly and playfully. Don't worry about, I'm not feeling, I'm spinning, oh no, let me focus. Just lighten up, it's a game, you can play with it. So you feel the texture of light. Feel, what does experiencing light feel like? What flavor does it have? What texture does it have? What quality does it have? And you don't worry about it, you just do that. Pretend you're doing it if you can't know how to do it. Just do it, just feel light. Don't worry about how to feel light, just feel light. Okay, cool. Now you notice that there's sound present in your experience, isn't there? And your mind will be named, oh, I hear the air conditioner, I hear the clock ticking, and you hear Peter talking and whatever else. Don't worry about that. And the mind may be naming what it is, but don't worry about that. At this point, just how do you know you're hearing? Sound is present, right? What is sound? What texture does sound have? What is sound? What is sound made of? So sound is in your experience. What's it feel like? What's sound feel like? What texture does it have? Is it grainy? Is it sharp? Is it fast? Is it slow? And don't worry about answering questions or applying words to it. Those are just games you play. Just feel it. Don't worry about getting to the bottom of it. Just feel it. Just touch it. Feel it. Sound feels like sound, doesn't it? Surprise, surprise. Now's where it gets interesting. Feel what sound feels like, and then feel what light feels like. Look at light. Look at the presence of light. How can you tell the difference? What does sound feel like that's different from the way light feels? What's the textural difference? And again, don't answer the question. There's no words. You just feel it. Just explore that as a koan. What does sound feel like? What's light feel like? And your mind may be thinking all kinds of stuff. Don't worry about it. Let it think. Who cares? Just feel the flavor of that. And then you can. What does touch feel like? So you feel touch. You feel your skin. You feel the temperature. You feel your butt on the chair. You feel your clothes. You feel whatever you're feeling, whatever happens to be showing up. But what does touch itself? What does all that have in common? What does touch? The energy of the field of touch. What does that feel like? What does touch energy feel like? Feeling energy. What texture does it have? And just feel it. Just play with it and feel it, and just spin off, and then just come back again and feel it. It's like a game. You just feel light and playful and easy with it. And then, okay, so this is what touch feels like. Now, what does hearing feel like? What's the difference? How can I tell touch from hearing? How do I know that I'm feeling the chair on my butt? How do I know that I'm hearing the air conditioner? How can I tell? You can tell because they have different textures. What is that difference? What is the texture? What is it? Just feel it. And then feel the texture of light. Light's also present, isn't it? They're all present at the same time. They don't get in each other's way, do they? It's like they exist in their own separate dimension or separate bandwidth, and they don't step on each other, get in each other's way. And what does light feel like? How does light differ from touch? Are there different frequencies? Are there different densities? What's up with that? Just feel that. Explore it by feeling it. What does sound feel like compared to light and touch? Okay, now, what does thought feel like? You're thinking. Every now and then there's a thought. Every now and then you notice you're thinking. So what is that? Something is present. When you're thinking, it's like, you're seeing because light's present. When you're thinking, what is this present? What's it feel like? What texture does it have? What's the texture of thought? What's the texture of mind? Just feel it. it's very mysterious, since you won't even know what it is, what you're feeling. Just feel it anyway. And then feel what sound feels like. Feel what light feels like. Feel what touch feels like. Feel what thought feels like. How is thought different than light? How can you tell? What's the difference between thought and light? Just feel it. Don't answer the question, just feel the difference. It's like putting your hand in a glass of water, you feel what water feels like. And then putting your hand on a rock, you feel what rock feels like. They feel different. So when you feel what thought feels like, just feel that. What's thought feel like? What's light feel like? What's sound feel like? What's touch feel like? Now notice how all these different frequencies of energy or whatever exist in their own dimension. They don't get in each other's way. The full field of light is present even when sound is present. And the light doesn't change the sound, and the sound doesn't change the light. And touch is present again, and it doesn't get in the way of sound or light. They coexist in sort of in different dimensions or different little bubbles or different bandwidths, who knows what. But they just coexist simultaneously. And thought the same way. Look at where does thought happen? So seeing happens in the field of vision, right? You can see the field of vision floating like a big kind of a sideways fuzzy edged oval, right, in your experience. Right here, this is big fuzzy oval of light. And all seeing happens in that oval, right? Anything outside that oval isn't seeing, is it? So where does thought happen? What space? So if light is in this oval, what space is thought in? And where is that space compared to the oval? Where is it? What sort of space is it that it happens in? What sort of space does hearing happen in? There's sort of this space, this rich big space full of sound and echoes in 3 dimensions, right? Where is that space compared to the space that the light's happening in? So here's this sideways oval of light, and here's this space of sound. Where are they next to? Where are they in relation to each other? Are they in front of each other, behind each other, above, below each other? You can't really say, can you? It's not like that. They coexist each in their own space, but those spaces don't have a spatial orientation to each other. They can see the way that's up. Or they can see what you see. Maybe you find a different answer. Just check it out. Just play with it. It's not like there's a right answer. The point is to develop sensitivity, to sensitize yourself to what is present, what is present. And you just feel that presence. Anyway, so this is an example of some kinds of experiments. Each of these is a specialized case of just feeling what is present. You can do just a generic feeling what is present. Just, okay, my experience is present, what does experience feel like? And just feel that. Or you can do kind of targeted things where you pretend you're looking at separate parts of it. And then you can begin to look at the orientation of the parts. And you can look at the way they're different. How is the texture of light different from the texture of sound? You can look at the way it's the same. How is the texture of light the same as the texture of sound? And so on and so forth. And so all these kinds of experiments are very, very easy. They're not particularly solid, but once you play with them for a little while, you become very good at it and be able to explore this very, very intimately. And you notice there's a lot of information to be found there. It's not information that you can put into words, but there's a lot you can get, in the same sense that as soon as you put your hand in water, you know what water feels like. You don't need to think about it or describe it or read a book about it. You just know just by the feeling of the texture. The same way, when you let yourself notice, you're feeling the presence of light. You feel what light feels like. You know what light feels like. You can't say, but you know it. You can know what sound feels like. You can know what thought feels like. And then you can explore are there any other, so you can make a category. make an inventory. You know, you find the field of vision, the field of sound, the field of touch, the field of thought. Are there any other fields? Is your experience to stop there? And then, no, wow, there's other stuff that's different, that's really different. And we don't even have words for that other stuff. And it's just these weird little flavors and zings and vibes. I don't know what. I mean, there's no words. It's just start talking bullshit when you try and talk about it. But you can feel that. And then once you find these other flavors, where are they happening? And then find some flavors that are other than that. And where are they happening? And then find some textures that are other than that, and where are they happening? You find these endless dimensions of experiential textural presence that you are, that the field of your experience consists of. And you discover these and engage with these firsthand, experientially. And don't worry about making sense of them. You're not trying to write a thesis or convince anyone of anything. You're having fun with what you're already having fun with, which is your experience. And just let yourself be with it on a very basic structural presence, a very basic textual presence. And the powerful point is, it turns out that just feeling this presence is an exercise of the highest intelligence. And by doing it, you are awakening to that high intelligence, and you learn to appreciate it. And you learn to appreciate the inherent intelligence, which is the mind of God. Literally, it is that. You don't need to have the fancy phrases like, Lord thy God, and all this kind of stuff. That's not the point. The point isn't calling it. The point is what it is. It's really the meaningfulness of reality itself. And the textures of presence are the embodiment of reality itself, which happens to be your meaningfulness and your embodiment, but since you're coextensive with reality, that makes sense.
After each one of those exercises, I would take the label off, and then things would just really expand.
Yeah, I mean, you get the labels, or there's the words and there's the thought, and then it may or may not be there, but light has nothing to do with calling it light.
Right.
Light isn't light. Light is this that is here in that dimension, so on and so forth. And I mean, you come to that, and that's very obvious.
So amazing to me. I've heard you say this definitely more than one time, give these examples more than one time, and yet something feels more motivated now when I go home to actually play with this rather than just have it here and isn't that interesting?
Well, every time you come to this stuff, you open to it, and it shows you something about itself. And that revelation shifts your own orientation to it. It's intrinsic. You sit in it differently. And that sitting in it differently can show up as different kinds of motivations or behaviors or what have you. Or not. I mean, it can be very subtle. But anytime you engage with this stuff, it is powerful. Don't underestimate how powerful this is. This is the highest yoga. It literally is the highest yoga. And it isn't that because I say it is. It's that because it happens to be. And if you play with it, you might discover that.
Well, I think that's just it. Now that, as you said, it's shifting the orientation. What came was whoever sat before some other time just didn't see it as it's going to matter. And this is. Yeah.
This is real.
Wow. It's amazing.
I feel strongly, powerfully, the intelligence.
Yeah,
It's that, well, first of all, just, there's no words in that feeling. And
it's not a rational intelligence.
But
it's a hyper-functional intelligence.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. It's completely fucking mind-blowing when you say, what is light, what is sound, how are they in relation to the other? There's no words, and yet it's completely clear.
Yeah, it reveals itself.
It's totally clear.
Yeah.
what the hell? That is, I mean, it's very, very, very powerful.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And you come to that. It becomes very obvious just by playing with it. And you are this intelligence, and you are this power, and that becomes very clear too. And it's no big deal. It's not like you have to go around going, "Oh wow, this is incredible." You know, I mean, you may do that for a while, but after a while, I mean, it's just normalcy. It's just what's always been the case. But you are it, and it is your embodiment in a way that becomes clearer and clearer. And you see what you are, and that's what they call realization. You realize what this is here, which of course is what you are. I mean, it's really no big deal in a sense because it's nothing new. It's what you've always been. It's just coming to see it clearly. You know, and it's easy to see clearly because it's actually not hidden. It's hidden in plain sight. This, the very embodiment, the very structure of your experiential field is that revelation. But we're looking for love in all the wrong places, you know? We look for all these abstractions and fancy elaborations as if that's where we're going to find the payoff, you know. But the pot of gold is at the end of the rainbow, and the rainbow is the energies of your experiential field.
And this is what the infant experiences.
Yeah.
All that you were talking about,
Sure.
that the infant doesn't have names for.
Sure.
It seems like it's
But it's different because the infant is also embodied in a very immature body, so their senses aren't fully functioning. So the clarity of what it is muddled by the chaos of orienting to a new context of immature sensory presence.
No wonder we're so ripe for it.
Yeah, which is why children are so vulnerable to the mindfuck of your parenting.
So I can feel the light, I can feel thought, but when it comes to feeling fear.
But fear is not actual. Fear is a gestalt.
construct.
I'm kind of stuck in that one.
But fear is not an actuality. Stick with mechanical presence. Stick with the presence of experience.
Are you
Fear is always reactive. Fear is a reaction to subtly held orientations, which are created and built into you through your prior experience.
But it even goes deeper with fear, like years ago I experienced that I wasn't here.
Right.
That nobody's here. So that fear, so I tried to look at that and going to fear. Like, okay, that's not.
But you had but your fear is of a condition which is not actual. Fear is always of something that's not actual.
But it was actually.
No, it's not. You are here.
But okay, the vehicle was here, but it was really clear. Nobody was here. Talking was coming through this vehicle.
But that is you.
But nobody was here.
That is you. Here you are. You're talking to me.
Well, now I am, but I'm saying.
No, but there's no one talking. But you're here and there's talking happening. You're telling it as there's a this and there's a that and they're contradictory. They're just two different ways of describing exactly the same thing. I am absolutely nothing. Reality itself speaks when I speak. That's literally true. But I am Peter Pan. And that's literally true. There's no contradiction there. All this no self stuff is a load of bollocks. It's a misinterpretation and partializing of something that is multidimensional. So it can't be held this way or that way. I mean, that's all this no self stuff is.
So who was speaking?
Huh?
Okay, I wasn't there. Who was speaking then?
I was speaking. Same thing that's always spoken, reality itself. Reality does everything. But reality is you. I mean, fear of no self is ultimately fear of dying, fear of disappearing.
Mm-hmm. It's just always me.
But dying is not the cessation of what you are. reality does not cease when you die. When your body dies, reality does
I
not cease.
do get that.
Your personality may stop, your mind may stop, everything may stop, but reality doesn't cease. And your personality and mind never were anything other than reality, so even if they disappear as modes, nothing has changed. Just like when you go to sleep and you're in deep sleep, your body isn't there, your personality isn't there, your thoughts aren't there, but you haven't lost anything. You don't feel like when you're in deep sleep, you don't feel like, oh no, this is terrible, I've lost my body, oh, this is horrible, what am I going to do? It doesn't feel like that, does it? It feels like a fullness.
But when we're in the,
Are you afraid of going to sleep?
No,
Well,
um,
where's yourself then?
that doesn't fear me at all. But I know the terrifying fear that I experienced when nobody was here. That still
Yeah,
fears me to memory.
but what you're afraid of is something that some implication that you're implying to that. There's a mental implication.
The terror.
Huh?
The terror of it, yeah.
Yeah, but terror of what? What's the it?
That nobody was here.
Are you afraid right now?
No, but I don't want
Is
to
somebody
go back
here?
to that again.
What are you back to? Is somebody here?
Well, I'm here now because like I said,
Are you?
I clunked back into my body and I was here. This was
So,
years ago.
but is being out of your body mean not being here?
Well, I don't know, because I just know that
See,
nobody was here.
yeah, but nobody's here now any more than there was here then. Nobody's ever here, and everyone is here, and there's no one, and there's no everyone, and there's no here, and there's no not here. It's just not like that. None of those conditions actually apply. So you had a partial understanding that you interpreted as being a certain way, and it was terrifying to you. And the fear you're reacting to is to that partial understanding, not to the event itself.
huh,
Not to what?
Not to the event itself.
it's the misinterpretation.
Right.
Yeah, in other words, you have a subtle misinterpretation or a subtle partial interpretation, and that's what you're afraid of. It's like when people are afraid of death, they aren't afraid of death, they're afraid of the fantasy of what it'll be. No one knows what death is. Death may be absolutely wonderful. It may be the greatest pleasure in your world. It may be the world's biggest orgasm. I mean, right, who knows? But that's not what people are afraid of. People aren't afraid of death, they're afraid of their family. Oh my God, I'm going to die, I'm going to disappear, my body's going to do this, that, and the other, which is all projection. It's like being afraid of the boogeyman. You're not afraid of death, you're afraid of your fantasy of death. And fear is always a reaction, and it's always a reaction to fantasy. Because real energy is not fearful. It doesn't inspire fear. On the contrary, real energy inspires joy. It's beautiful, it's vital, it's enervating.
But the sense of self, like when I, for instance, look up, and even as we were doing these experiments, so for instance, like the first instance was always like looking out from behind my eyeballs to see this field of vision.
Sure.
And then again, the sense of localization, hearing the sound.
Sure.
And then when the awareness of the sound and the light, to see what it meant together. So there is, there's a little drop or a shift from being aware of to awareness itself, as in something that's easy. But the more habitual reality is that I close my eyes, for instance, and then there's like all this energy kind of happening, and it's almost like get up on top. It's like I need to be aware of from a habitual position. Then it's the fear of being submerged.
I understand. Yeah, but again, as you say, this is a habit, and it's possible to retrain that habit. And that habit basically consists of mental interpretations. And so this is why I recommend this kind of training where you feel your experience, just playfully and very relaxedly occasionally, and not very, don't try to hold on to something. It's not like you're trying to get somewhere, you just relax and feel the presence of your experience, just from time to time. Because basically, your experience is present regardless of your stance. Regardless of whether you're here or here, or it's submerged or not submerged, experience doesn't know about that. It's not like that. It just is. And by feeling that, you recalibrate, you're training yourself and letting yourself feel that isness that is not partial, it's not oriented in any partial way. It's not oriented at all. It just is. And so by feeling that, you're training yourself just subliminally, just directly into the experience of that, into that perspective. And gradually, that perspective can become stronger than these mental perspectives of needing to, be on top of things or needing to be localized and these kinds of things. And it's not that there's any problem with that. There's no problem with all of this. The problem is doing it compulsively, doing it habitually. Whereas when you train in the energy presence and its non-localization, it doesn't negate the ability to have these different frameworks, but it reduces the compulsion, it reduces the habit of needing to. And so then you're less entrapped, you're less less compulsive.
So when I experimented with that, it seemed like, so I'd meet this person, talk about something technical, and then I'd be so fascinated by the light playing out on his thing and the sense of love that I felt for the person and all that. But then there was also this fear that I was not following that thread. So because I was like those dory fish, who shiny, and then getting thrown off.
Yeah.
So and then it happens so often that it's like I just wouldn't care at some point. But then something happened and I found my conditioning came back like really heavy. And then I wanted to systematize this whole thing and then it all went.
But, this is an issue. It may be, this happens to people. Sometimes they discover this and they find it so beautiful, they forget it, they don't give a shit, and all of a sudden they lose their job. But hey, that's okay, people lose their job all the time. Maybe you become a gardener or something. That's possible, that happens. But not necessarily. But it also can happen that you can train in this and still retain the ability to play, to participate intellectually and participate with these kinds of abstractions without needing to feel caught in it, or without needing to feel like caught. So you can still be enjoying the energy presence and at the same time be able to kind of multitask and touch into, not have it be mutually exclusive, not have it be an either or. But it's a matter of training and becoming familiar with it, so that then you have more of an option. It's less automatic. In a way, our enemy is our automatism, our habits, because then we're not in control. We get jerked around. But the more you train in this, then you may feel you have a little more choice. You can kind of steer it and direct it and choose to accentuate an intellectual level or choose to accentuate an energy presence level and so on and so forth. It's just a matter of like adjusting a focus in a microscope or a telescope or something.
But I've kind of also tried this, but I'm somewhere I am still missing the point. As in, for instance, when I read a book, it's like for a page maybe I can allow the ideas, the word, everything to just assemble itself as automatic and then stuff. But then the familiar feeling of I am back behind my eyeballs, engaging, absorbing, doing as a doer. So that is more the prevalent thing.
Well, it can be a process of training. It can be an ongoing engagement where you reorient yourself gradually. It's not necessarily that you can just turn it off and stop, And so this kind of an engagement with your experience can be just a slow reorientation. It's like you're learning something gradually and just take your time, and eventually and slowly it reshifts the balance of things. And then, not necessarily drastically, but gradually you may notice you can do that. You can be in this very perspective, but you don't, it's less compulsive. You don't have to do it. You can relax and sort of change, you can change the focus more deliberately. And you can deliberately be, you know, in your persona and your intellect and so on. You can deliberately sort of shift your focus of attention to other, you know, aspects of the experience of feeling and so on.
Forgive me for asking a personal question, but if you kind of did a, say for example, a 4-digit by 4-digit multiplication, does that happen automatically?
Well, in a sense, everything happens automatically, but what we think of as not automatic is actually automatic. Because where else can it come? Like, suppose I have an intellectual ability. Suppose I learned how to do multiplication and I have my process and so on, I can do it. But the ability to do that is something that arises with my intelligence. And my intelligence is not something I did on purpose. I didn't put it there. I didn't put the ability to learn that there. I didn't put the ability to employ those modes of functioning. So even when I'm doing it, it is actually automatic, even though it doesn't look automatic superficially.
So
You see what I mean?
when you're doing it though, is the field of presence still available to you at with the same strength as when you're doing it?
Not so much. I mean, it's a matter of focus. I focus in on that. The focus can move, but you know, when something is in focus, it doesn't eliminate everything else. It may diminish it, but it doesn't erase it. So again, if I'm focused on a specialized task, then certainly the focus may be there very intensely. But there's sort of a background feeling of the context, even if it's, you know, not very strong, but it's always there. Yeah. You know, there's another exercise, but we did that a little bit yesterday. I mean, we didn't really do an exercise, I just sort of talked about it, but you can experiment with focus. Focus itself is very interesting. And especially, normally, our normal mode, I think, for most people, the normal mode of focus is when you're focusing on something, you pretend that you can't, that's all there is. You know? But in actuality, if you look at the way your experience works, you'll notice that when you're focused on something, everything else is still there. It's just a diminished clarity, diminished emphasis, and so on. But it's not erased. It doesn't get canceled out. And simply by, you know, doing an exercise where you notice your focus you can notice your focus in sensory. You can notice your focus shifting. You can say, now I'm going to focus on thinking, and I can focus on seeing. I can focus on thinking. And you just do these kinds of things. You just feel that shifting. And notice how when you shift, what you focus on becomes more front center, but the rest doesn't actually disappear. It's just sort of diminished. And so then you get more of a sense of the continuity of the field, even when you're focused. Even when you're intently focused, the field doesn't disappear. But I think frequently we haven't noticed that, and so we just haven't, we treat it more binary, where we're either thinking about this or that, you know, but it's not really like that. And when you notice it's not like that, it changes your ability to feel that that's so. Because experience is always a whole. Experience never cuts off from itself, even when it pretends to, even when it seems like it is, it never actually happens. And so if you can train yourself to notice that, and then even when you're very eccentric within your experience, even when you're very off-center into some very specialized focus, the rest is actually still there. And so you don't feel cut off. But when we haven't noticed this, we might feel cut off. We might think of it either or. I'm in my head or I'm in my heart or something like this. But it's silly because it's not actually binary. It's not mutually exclusive.
I get totally what you say, although I don't know at what level, because even when totally lost in thought, paralyzed or whatever, if someone kind of did this in front of me, I'll still know that they did that.
Yeah, sure.
And so there is that presence still going on. Although it seems like, yeah, that's a mode that is something that I have had very little luck with. I've been kind of trying to feel the activity, but almost always feel restrained. Like I go sit at my job actually first half hour because I've been listening to something on the radio related to this and stuff. That's all day. And then it's like after that, it's like heavy thought and.
Yeah. But again, you know, it can be just a gradual retraining, and different people are different. Some of us are more, you know, have different modes. Some of us are more intellectual than others, are more this way or more that way. And so depending upon your nature, you have to work with your own proclivities. You have to work with your own nature. And then some areas you might have to work for a more prolonged period or harder to develop a sensitivity. But ultimately it's not impossible, and ultimately anything you do will be cumulative. So any degree of sensitivity, sort of sensitivity training, in one way that, in one sense, that's all this is, a sensitivity to your experiential field. Any degree of that training will have an effect, even if it's only slight and gradual. So the trick is to just play with it for a prolonged period of time, and eventually you'll notice it beginning to loosen up.
That's been my experience. That's been exactly my experience.
Yeah, and another really interesting facet of this yoga is that it will be doing more than you're aware of. Most of its work happens subliminally and under the table. So you're not, it's, you know, you wake up one day and go, wow, things are really different than they were. But every step of the way, you didn't notice much changing. It's like, you know, the frog in cold water has the heat under it. You know, you don't really notice, by the way, the water's kind of boiling, isn't it? It seems like things are going along more or less similar to the way they are every day. But in actuality, this is, you know, I can't overestimate, I can't over convey how powerful this is. It's really profoundly powerful and very radical. And simply this orienting to the actual, you know, raw presence of your experiential field is powerfully transformative.
Things really seem to get just lighter.
Yeah, because it is light. I mean, I use this phrase radiant presence, and I actually mean it very literally. That's the most accurate phrase I've come up with for what is actually here. You know, there is transcendental presence that by its nature is radiant, and it never becomes anything more than transcendental presence that is radiant. And we're used to thinking, oh, but it's the world, and it's people, and it's my body, and it's my history, and it's my karma, and it's society, and it's like, it looks like it's that. But, you know, look more closely, keep looking more closely, and eventually you will come to see what it really is. That happens to look like that, sure. It can be described in those terms, but it isn't actually that. And you can come to know this very clearly and very intimately.
It's been my experience. I had some really good experiences with that. One of the first times it really happened, I was trying all these techniques, and then at one point I walked into the library one day off the bus, and all I heard, I smelled, I saw the lights, I heard all the sounds, and it just went into this magical feeling. It felt so good.
Sure.
And I wasn't thinking anything because I said, this is just marvelous. Sure. And I stayed in that for quite some time. And then now it's much easier to get into that, because I'll go into this grocery store and I'll sit there to drink a coffee and I'll watch all the people move around. Then I hear the little sounds and I see, oh,
sure.
It's just
it's
amazing.
A dance of vibes. It's a dance of life.
It's really, it's very, and there's no effort.
No, there's no effort.
It's just a natural.
Reality is doing itself. Reality is doing you.
Yeah.
So when you say aware of everything is, or maybe you didn't say it, but awareness of everything is awareness of nothing. I kind of thought you said that yesterday. Is that because when you're aware of everything, it is this dance of light that he was describing as in now you're not imposing concrete structures with that wall taking off.
Sure. And there's nothing really there. It's like in a dream. When you say you're in a dream, when you're in a dream, it may seem it's very real and there's all these events going on and whatever, you're there in the body and there's circumstances and things you're doing and so on and so forth. But then you wake up and you think, this was a dream. Nothing was there. There were no things there. There were no people there. I wasn't even there as a body. There was no substance there. There was nothing there at all. And that nothing dream looked like all that.
Well,
And it's just the same here.
Well, why is it that having Peter Brown in my dream makes it more real?
It doesn't make it more real. It's because this whole focus is directing your attention at the way that it is real. So you're noticing it. It's possible to notice and not notice. It's kind of like hypnosis. You know, our orientation to the way we experience our experience is kind of like a self-hypnosis that happens. Mm. And we dull ourselves down. We create normalcy, we create dullness, we create problems in our life by thinking they're there. Just like in a dream, you think it's really there. And so by thinking it's there, you create it. Maybe big problems in the dream, right? But it's all, you're just thinking it's a big problem. This is a dream, I've got a big problem. And the same thing here, exactly the same thing. But we don't recognize it until you train in it, because we're so used to believing what we think, and there seems to be a lot of evidence to support it. Of course this is real. When I get in trouble, things screw up, I have problems, you know, so it's important not to pay attention, take care of things, right? It seems to be that way. But then when you retrain in what it really is, you discover that it's all of these patterns that are just doing themselves, just like a dream. And in a real sense, there's nothing here. There's nothing here but you. Just like when you're dreaming, there's nothing there but you. It happens to look like all this. And that's very peculiar, but dreams are very, why does the dream look like that?
So you see us, literally see us, and you also know it's a dream?
Sure.
Yeah.
You are a pattern of energy appearing in transcendental reality. But there's nothing but patterns of energy appearing in transcendental reality, so there's no surprise. Mm-hmm. These walls are patterns of energy appearing in transcendental reality. Mm-hmm. Peter Brown and his body and personality are patterns of energy appearing in transcendental reality. And this transcendental reality is a field which is miraculously aware of itself, and that's what I am. But the field is doing all the patterns, so I'm in all of this too. And so are you, that's all that there is. The point is to notice that that's a fact. But we're used to being brainwashed and no, you're you and you're there and you're in this body and you're in this environment and the environment is not you and you better pay close attention to it or you're going to get in trouble. Which is, you know, child abuse. Also known as being raised as a functional adult.
So if it's, I'd like to come back to what she was saying. I just want to. So I have this experience of myself. It's actually like a felt experience.
Sure.
And then let's say some miracle happens, which might have been the case. And all of a sudden that just kind of disappeared.
Sure.
And so they would feel like something got lost, something that was familiar suddenly isn't there. And my guess would be that the mind would create some drama about that. The mind would, so it's the mind that gets scared.
Of course. Fear is always a reaction to mental interpretation. Reality itself has absolutely nothing to fear. And when you see reality, when you come to see reality, your fear will drop off. Because there is literally nothing to fear. There's nothing but light here. How can you be afraid of light?
So when we come to see reality more clearly, there is less fear.
There's no fear. Emotion, here's what it looks like. Emotion in a normal human context looks like all of these upwellings of fear and joy and happiness and love. And so it's like these big waves come up, you know, of all of this stuff. And they're sort of mutually exclusive. When you're angry, you're not happy. Anger comes up, and then happy comes up, and then afraid comes up, and then sad comes up, and all of these things come up, and they seem very separate. But when you settle more into the field of presence, as it actually is, you settle into what emotion actually is. Emotion is its own bandwidth. But an emotion, like all experiential bandwidths, is full of energy, it's full of radiance. And the radiance of emotion is like a sea of richness. And you feel the sea of richness. Just like your field of vision is a field of light, and you feel the richness of the light. And the emotions is a richness of emotional lusciousness. You know, sensation is a richness of that sparkly touch energy. Thought is a richness of the presence of this amazing thought energy, and so on and so forth. In all of these bandwidths, there's this astounding patterning of all of these implications and patterns that appear with astounding meaningfulness and cross correspondence with each other and all sorts of implications. And it's always this amazing show.
So let's say, I've never done this, but let's say somebody takes acid.
I was just thinking.
That's
what you described it sounded like it.
Hey.
So, and then, you know, from what I've heard, there's all this weirdness going on or whatever, and people become terrified. And
so you do. Some people become terrified. Some people become very happy and ecstatic.
Yes.
Some people become bored. Some people become angry.
So let's say the ones that become terrified. I'm gathering that the reference point got completely tipped upside down, and so there's fear. I mean, because of the reference point.
The fear.
Take your breath.
I can't tell you what that sounds like.
Really does sound the fear is not of the reference point changing or being lost. The fear is that it shouldn't have happened. The fear is that you should have a reference point and you don't. And so the fear is not from
the fear is that you should have a
reference. Yeah. And you can't figure out how to find one. You think you're supposed to, and you think that's a real problem and you don't have one. If you just relax, you know, as the kids these days say, chill the fuck out, and just, okay, there's no reference point, cool. Go with the flow, and it's like, no problem, no fear. So fear is always of lack of control, and that fear isn't because of lack of control. The fear is because we think there's supposed to be control.
Oh my God, that's crazy. Wow.
Well, sure, it's crazy. It is literally.
Wow. Wow.
So just as she's taking notes, and I'm kind of like thinking as well that this is important, this is not. And in the context of what you said today as to what you think is important is not important,
right?
And what do you think is unimportant is?
Yeah.
Meaning, as I took it, that this whole pure experience is happening, and we are picking and choosing according to what is our best or what our value system is.
Exactly.
But then there's also this thing about, you said like training the sensitivity, right?
Yes.
So how do I even know that training my sensitivity, for instance, I do it in a bunch of ways, and then how do I know that I'm not kidding myself.
Well, you may be kidding yourself. You have to come to it by trial and error. You have to discover for yourself what works and what's real.
What's kidding oneself?
Do you think this is kidding yourself right here?
What is kidding oneself?
Yeah, kidding myself as in.
Okay, cut it out.
I know it's worth that.
You go sit in that chair in the corner of the room.
But I just mean that oftentimes I would kind of do something that I would tell myself is I believe that.
Sure.
It's kind of confused of whereas I'd be on another dead end.
Yeah. This is a big problem. Ultimately, you have to find for yourself, and you can't know whether you're kidding yourself until you discover that you are, or better yet, until you discover you're not. But you try these things, and then maybe you can make them work, and maybe you can't, or maybe you think you're making it work, but you're kidding yourself. And ultimately, this is just the luck of your situation, the luck of your resources, and your fortune, basically, as to whether or not you can stumble onto the right way, so to speak. But it's definitely something you have to come to yourself. I mean, I could be talking to, I could take 1,000 people off the street and be talking to them, and 95% of them would be totally disinterested, and of the 5% of them that were interested, most of them would completely misunderstand everything I'm saying. And if the few of those that understood what I'm saying, they're going to try and bollocks it up, not do a very good job. So it's all down to your managing to stumble onto an effective approach. And there's no way to guarantee that. You're basically on your own. You have to trial and error, and you do the best you can. But your only real guide is your own sense of what's right. I mean, you're here, so you must think there might be something valuable. So that's a sense right there. There's something valuable. And so you get the information that's here, and you take pieces of it, and you say, this might be valuable. And so you explore it and see if it is. And maybe you find value, maybe you don't. And maybe there is value here, but you don't find it. Or maybe there's no value here and it's all a bunch of hogwash. And you're glad to go somewhere else. But in any case, it's up to you. It's up to you to make a go of it. I mean, you can't. There's no guarantee. There's no external reference. So, but this is the nature of it. So, which is some people might think it's a good thing. It's up to you. If you're intrepid, self-motivated person, if you're more cautious, you might think, oh, this terrible situation. I want to guarantee it a program and a contract, and but life is kind of, at the end of the day, life is up to you anyway, how you live your life, and so you have to follow your best inspiration, your best intuition.
Maybe Jiminy Cricket was right when he said, let your conscience be your guide. If you take away conscience as having this and moral, but in a way that you do always know what to do. So
ultimately, that's
anyway.
Ultimately, that's our only guide. I mean, how do you navigate your life? You follow your sense of the way to navigate your life, which is ultimately, your conscience or your inspiration or your intuition or what have you, whatever you want to call it. And this is your sole ultimate resource in this spiritual inquiry as well.
But
how do you know what's for real?
We don't construct that. I mean, I think we
Of course
think
not.
maybe we
Of course
construct that.
not.
But if you go back to that
You don't
feeling.
But you don't construct anything.
Yeah. I mean, like how, yesterday you were saying, okay, what, like, just feel that, what is actually, it's not that I'm sitting here going, oh, I'm gonna do this, that, or the other, or like be walking. How different is self-realization to the hand thing? I mean.
It's not, it's never at all.
Yeah, but it seems.
You can't know what realization is until it happens. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about what it is. Don't worry about what is different than or the same as.
No,
And when that becomes relevant to consider, you'll already know the answers to all those things.
Well, it's just my comment is about I think I'm doing a lot more than I'm not doing.
Yeah, that's okay. That's fine.
Yeah, I know, it is fine. And the more I feel that, the more finer it is.
Yeah.
It's, you know.
For sure.
Because it takes the onus off of my imaginary shoulders. That
Yeah.
I'm somehow like, there's all this shit I gotta do.
Well, that comes and that grows, and that's a sign of good practice. You know, when you feel this lightness, this letting go, or this, you know, freedom from relative freedom from responsibility, or freedom from stuckness, or what have you. It's wonderful. Those are the flavors of liberation. And real, actual, final liberation, so to speak, is just the ultimate extreme of that, where you really can't it. That's it. This is doing everything. I'm out to pasture. I'm out to field. You know, I ain't doing shit. I may succeed or fail, but it's the will of God. It's not having to do with what I'm doing, and it doesn't really matter ultimately. Should we break for lunch? What do y'all feel like?
Sure.
I'm hungry,
Let's break for
but I'm
lunch.
only one.
You're all.
So are we all.
So, what you do is you get a beautiful apple, right? Beautiful ripe apple. You sit in a room, you can smell it, you can taste it, you can hear it crunch.
So what
It's a
time
full
did we
field
come back?
engagement right there.
That's right.
Peter, what time did we come back? I mean, yeah.
It's
2 hours,
very-
by 1:30.
Very psychedelic.
Yeah.
Extremely psychedelic.
Today, unfortunately, I have to leave at about 3:30. We have to knock up at 3:30 for me to make the plane. But that'll give us a good 2 hours when we get back, so we can.
So maybe we take a shorter lunch?
Yeah, an hour and a half.
Yeah,
Shorter than 2 hours.
that's right.
So what time is that?
We'll have a good 2 hours. That's a lot of time.
Yeah.
That's for the little hand that's on the tube and the big hand.
So we get back here at 1:30, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah, 1:30, that's what I thought.
1:30-ish.
Ish.